Ahead of Monday's election, Northwest Territories Premier R.J. Simpson published an open letter calling on the federal government to focus on the North. In it, he asks for investment, collaboration, and progress for the Northwest Territories. We sat down earlier to talk about it. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure, anytime.
So I'm going to start with a line from your open letter. I'm just going to read it. Canada must choose by 2030, will we be a northern power or a bystander in our own backyard? I'm wondering which of those two you think we are right now.
Well, there's a lot of attention on the North right now, from around the world, and finally from our own federal government as well. And that's because of the pressure from the outside world. And so it's clear that we need to do more as a country to invest in the North. And so that in terms of the infrastructure for day-to-day use, but also our military infrastructure. That's been something that's been noted as I've talked to people from across the country, and when I was down in the United States, they noted that as well. So even our allies in the United States say we need to do more on that front.
So I'm kind of reading a bystander in our own backyard in a way vibe right now. How would we move then to a northern power in 5 years?
You know what, there's so much potential in the North. It's just going to take some focus by the federal government. We are a small government. We're a huge territory, but a small government and a small population. But we have big aspirations, but we need that partnership with the federal government. And so there's big opportunities for investments in things like the Mackenzie Valley Highway, Slave Geological Province Road. And once we start making those investments, it not only asserts our sovereignty, it opens up economic corridors and access to resources that will benefit not just the North, but all of Canada.
Let's talk about some of those projects. I'm curious what your ask is of Ottawa. What are the specifics that you want from them? Consultation is good. We need that. We need a seat at the table. But what specifically do you want them to invest in?
At a very high level, I want them to pay attention to us. That's the first thing. Ottawa needs to realize we're not a province. We have different needs, and we have a different relationship with Ottawa. And when they design a program, when they roll out a funding pot, they need to have that consideration that the North is different. Not just us, everything north of 60 is different. And so if we have that, that's a great starting point. And then from there, there's opportunities for big investments in infrastructure, working with us on the regulatory regime to ensure that we can do more resource extraction for the benefit of everyone. So lots of opportunities.
Yeah, I'll go back to the piece again, where you're making this argument that northern infrastructure enhances Canada's security, trade capacity, and economic independence. So here in the North, we know what we need and we know why we need it. But I'm wondering in the South, as you're making these arguments, what you would say to people who might look at us and say, there's not that many people in the Northern Territories, specifically, of course, for us in the Northwest Territories. Why are we spending all this money on infrastructure? How does that further Canada's security and sovereignty?
Well, there wasn't that many people in southern Canada when the railroads were built and when major investments like that were made. And so it's sort of that old adage, if you build it, they will come. And so without a highway, how do we expect to build our economy and to grow our economy? So once we get those pieces in place, then we can grow. And also, we have resources that are, they're territorial resources, they're the resources of the Indigenous peoples whose land this is, but they benefit all of Canada. And so ensuring that we make those investments so that we can benefit all Canadians is important.
There's been a pattern lately of the northern premiers, I think, working to capitalize on this energy, this focus globally in the North. So how do you keep that energy forward when that focus starts to shift, as it always inevitably does?
Well, I think in this case, there's a lot of talk about Canada's NATO commitment of 2% and talk about meeting that by 2030 by a number of the parties right now running federally. And so just by that alone, I think that's going to help us keep that focus on this. When we talk about things like military investment and dual use infrastructure, that's always going to be at the forefront. The need for critical minerals to develop new industries, to support existing industries, that's always going to be there because as we see what's going on in the world, traditional supply chains can't necessarily be relied upon. We are a country that's ruled by law, governed by law. We're predictable. And we have high environmental standards. It's a place people want to do business. And so I think it's important to ensure that people are aware of that and that we're capitalizing on that.
And how do you bridge, so you mentioned, the Northwest Territories government is a small government for a vast land. There's a lot of needs across Canada. And we need both the federal investment and also private sector investment. So how do you balance all of that while also looking at that private sector investment and justifying to people, whether it's tax cuts or whatever the programs might be, why we're helping those private investors with our taxpayer money, both, I guess, territorially, and I know you're not a federal politician, but you have those conversations.
Well, when I look at the investments that were made by tax dollars in the North, they've resulted in employment for people, right? And so, even if we're supporting a mining operation, working with them on their regulatory system or on that process, that's eventually going to lead to benefits for Northerners. All of these things, they lead to economic opportunities. And so I always take the lens of, yeah, we're a big territory, but we got to bring it down to the community level. And so I think about the benefits to individuals in some of the small communities, especially where there isn't a lot of economy. How do we support them to grow their economy? There's also an element of reconciliation here. There's a lot of talk about that at the federal level, and we've seen some things happen, but there's a lot more to be done. The North has been left out of investments that occurred across Canada. We haven't been given that opportunity to advance with the rest of Canada. And so here's an opportunity to make that right. And it's a smart thing to do for the government as well, because we got to remember the federal government gets part of our mining royalties as well. When we have some of these big mines, there's people from across Canada working here. So the investments by the federal government, yes, they might require a lot of money, but there's big long-term benefits for all of Canada.
We've long needed infrastructure in the North, right? I think that's one of the big issues that we have is we need infrastructure, and it's long been an ask from the territorial governments, all of them. I'm just wondering in your conversations if you've noticed lately that there's been a different tone, perhaps, just with this focus on the North. We've seen the lobbying efforts getting front and center saying, hey, like you said, we need you to pay attention to us. And I just wonder if the politicians that you're talking with in Ottawa are receiving that message in a different way.
I would say they are. And that is because of the focus the entire world is putting on the North. They're being forced to pay attention. And so it's up to us to make sure that we hold on to their attention. And we do that by consistent lobbying of the federal government, working with Indigenous governments in the territory to go and lobby jointly, which I think goes a long way. And so yes, there is attention right now. There is a focus both at the political level and at the public service level, but it's up to us to sustain that. And some of the comments I've heard are people are talking about the North. They're not necessarily talking to the North. So that's a conversation we need to have as well.
And I know in addition to publishing this piece, you also sent letters to the federal party leaders. Can you kind of sum up what was in those letters and if you've had any responses?
Yeah, so we sent letters to the federal leaders as well as the local candidates asking their views on some of the issues that are facing the territory. So how are they going to work with Indigenous governments? What are they going to do to help us address our infrastructure deficit? And we've received a couple responses, and we've actually posted those online, so all of the public can have a look at those to help inform their decision.
And let's talk about the decision people are making on Monday, not from a personal perspective, but from your perspective as leader. When we have a prime minister that is elected, how are you going to get in that person's ear with these ideas?
Well, and that's where our strategy comes in of engaging the federal government. So we engage at the officials level, so the public service level, because I know personally that if I just have a meeting and I have no background information on that meeting, we're not going to see good outcomes out of there. So we're engaging at the officials level so that when we actually go and meet with the ministers and meet with the prime minister, they'll know what we need. They'll know what they can do to help us, and we can make it productive meetings. And so, we're actively looking at when we can get in front of the Prime Minister, whoever that may be, as soon as possible, because we know this first couple months of a new government is going to be critical. Like, they're going to be getting their feet under them, but they're also going to be forming their ideas and building their budget.
Okay. Thank you so much, Premier, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.